All right, Steve, you may begin the meeting.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to call to order this May 2nd, 2024 meeting of the Norwalk Shellfish Commission. And the chair notes that all commissioners are present and therefore a quorum is present. Attendance, please. Besides that,
I have taken it.
thank you, sir. Approval of the minutes from the April meeting.
I thought they were well done, so I vote to approve the minutes.
Thank
I
you.
second
Make a
it.
motion.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Approved. So item 3 is the 72, and I see that Mr. Tomas and Mr. Hiltz have joined. Bill, you want to bring them over perhaps, please?
I'm trying to do that right now. And okay, they've been brought in as panelists.
Great, thank you, sir. So thanks, Mr. Hiltz and Mr. Tomas, for coming. The purpose of this meeting is in follow-up to the comments made by the state and the Norwalk Harbor Management Commission, mainly with respect to the waterward terminus of the proposed pier, ramp, and dock combination, such that there was an objection, if I'm following correctly, to winter removal. So I think at this time, what I'd like to do is just leave this open for you all to present your case to the commission, and we'll discuss it.
Great. Thank you, Steve. Good evening, everybody, and thanks for taking the time. Basically, it comes down to this, or, a little background. I mean, the structures are all permitted. They got everybody's approval. And, in the course of, actually having the thing in place, Mr. Tomas, we removed the ramp and the float. And we had some preliminary discussion with Catherine Becker at DEP just about, potentially modifying the permit to allow either both the float and the ramp, or at least the ramp to remain in place or, suspended, over the winter months. A rationale behind this is that, the floating dock itself is suspended on the float stop, so it's above the substrate. And it wouldn't impact any, harvesting, because basically you can't get in there to harvest given the construction of the float stops. And as far as the ramp's concerned, the ramp, the pilings at the landward base of the floating dock, they're about 3.5 feet from the tidal wetlands waterward extent. So the ramp would not extend beyond the 10-foot setback that's required when you perform any harvesting activities. So it's neither here nor there whether it's in place and hung from the pilings or removed. It doesn't shade the grass underneath it. It doesn't have any adverse impacts in that regard. So we didn't want to. We basically, as a follow-up to our initial discussion with Ms. Becker at DEP, we just said, this is something that all parties should be, brought in to consider. And so that's why we're here before you tonight.
Thank you, sir. Chairman Kibbe and Mr. Stedman, would you guys please express what was discussed at Harbor Management for this commission?
Go ahead, Jeff.
Oh, well, I think that the commission, and I think it's fair to say, defer to the Shellfish Commission on this, and the standard, I shouldn't say standard, but the normal approach or finding is that the float should be removed in the off season. I guess you could always say that unless there are compelling reasons otherwise, but absent the Shellfish Commission, and there was also a question about whether this required another another permit application to do this. And then if that's the case, then we'll be looking at it again. But I think it's fair to say, and Alan can correct me if I'm wrong, is that the Harbor Commission did not feel in this instance it was appropriate to change their normal condition for removal in the off season, unless I guess that the Shellfish Commission felt that was appropriate. Is that,
Okay,
That's
thanks.
accurate. I mean, that's
Anything-
my recollection as well, Jeff.
Oh, thanks, guys. Quick question, John.
Yeah.
In terms of the ramp itself, how high off the bottom would the ramp be if it was tied up as high as possible to the piles?
You're probably talking about from the substrate up, I'd say a minimum of 10 feet, Steve, and probably more. You know, I mean, you know, that would be kind of a horizontal out, but I mean, you could probably go a little bit higher if you needed.
Okay, so well above the 5 feet mean high water for a
Oh,
pier.
yeah, no, I mean, that clearance is definitely obeyed, yeah.
Okay. And I think perhaps the only misunderstanding that there might be is the dock itself. And the reason for moving it is for the hand picking of seed oysters, no matter how infrequent. So if the dock was to be left in place, and that would preclude being able to get in there with anything essentially. And I think there's also something to be said biologically, allowing that bottom to heal for a certain number of months out of the year rather than be covered, the float stops notwithstanding.
You know, I think that's a valid, you know, I definitely can see the ability to harvest. I mean, I think the substrate there isn't necessarily conducive to oysters, but that could change, obviously. One thing we could do is have the ability to remove the float if it was determined that, harvesting was to take place. I mean, I don't think there'd be any objection to that, but bottom line is that if you feel it's, imperative to remove the float for the reasons you just stated, I can't argue with that.
Okay. Any questions for the applicant or the agent, commissioners, or harbor management colleagues?
Steve, I'm sorry you can't see me on the computer, but my thought was that in all of these sorts of circumstances, there could be a compelling reason why there should be a variation in the policy or some sort of change. But absent that compelling reason, I don't. You have to be careful for not setting a precedent that someone else can use in another situation to say, well, you let so and so did it, or you let another applicant do it. Why not me? So that's the reason for really having a compelling reason to change the policy or to apply the policy in a different way or not apply the policy.
Right.
Anyway, that's my last comment to that. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. I have a question, John. So the landward portion of the floating dock, does it have a pair of piles?
Yes, the pilings are at the landward end of the floating dock. Yep.
Okay, so I see that then there's no way to pull a dredge between those piles and the waterward terminus of the pier.
No, and as I pointed out earlier, Steve, the requirement is a 10-foot setback from the Spartina.
Mhm.
So, again, the distance between the float anchor pilings and the waterward limit of Spartina, as I said, it's around 3.5 feet.
Mhm. Yeah, I can see tying up the ramp as high as it could possibly go. Maybe recommending that as a condition, but I think the floating dock would have to be removed during the winter. Any questions, comments, a motion, anyone?
None here.
Well, I'll make a motion that, the, the, the ramp can be raised as high as possible and removal of the floating dock.
For the winter.
Yes, for the winter.
Any discussion? Okay, let's, anything else, John?
No, you guys asked about the need for an additional permit. That's not been made clear. I think it's a modification to the existing permit, but I don't know if that will require a certificate of permission application or not.
Right.
That we, again, this is all very preliminary, Steve, so it's really, we didn't want to start, force feeding anybody any, application in which we didn't have a discussion beforehand. So.
No worries. We'll do this now. We'll just pay attention to it. So there is a motion to tie up the ramp as high as possible during the winter and the removal of the floating dock during the winter months.
Steve, before you do the motion,
Yes.
is has that been approved in any other dock to tie it up?
Has the ramp been approved to be tied up?
Similar situations, yeah, a similar situation.
So I know that people do it, but I don't know if that's before my time. So the question is essentially how would one hand pick, and it would have to be picked by hand. So taking the ramp totally out or tying it up very high is basically the same thing. Am I correct on that, Pete?
Yes, you are. That area they'd have to hand pick. They couldn't dredge it. So. And a lot of people do just raise their docks due to their pulling their floating docks because the ramp, they tie the ramp up as high as they can. I think when we were down there, we looked over and there was one that was tied up already. I mean, not for sure, but.
Anything else, Nick?
No, that's it.
Thank you, sir. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Abstentions? Okay, motion carries. Thanks, John. We'll stay in touch with
I'll
this.
keep you in the loop. What I'll do, Steve, is I'm going to go back to Ms. Becker at Deep and just say that, we've had this discussion. You guys are okay with the ramp as motioned, and then see where she takes it. And then I'll just copy you and the Harbor Management Commission on all correspondence, so everybody's in the loop.
Thank you kindly, sir.
All righty.
Have
a great night, everybody.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Mr. Thomas.
Thank you.
Public comment. We do have one attendee, and if she would like to speak this evening, if she would kindly raise her hand electronically. Seeing no hand, we'll move on to the treasurer's report. Bill, please, sir.
Sure. The expenditure report remains the same as last month. There was no change. The current balance is $24,938.
Thank you kindly, sir. Secretary's report. Just really like to comment on today's news, and first and foremost to thank the first responders, our local people and state people, for what they did. And it was nothing short of amazing for what was a disaster not being even more of a disaster. So we do have one first responder here, Sergeant Bisegli, and just a round of applause, please. Well, thanks, Justin, and thank everyone who was involved, please.
Will do. Thank you very much.
And thank you, by the way, Steve, for keeping us all informed on the board as to what was happening in real time.
You're welcome. And also credit goes to Bill for his contact with the state and aquaculture. So just FYI, there was an emergency closure put into place just as an abundance of caution. until further environmental assessment can be made. So we'll give that a little bit of time. Every indication is that there is no effect to the shellfish beds, and at which time, in agreement with the Department of Health, we can open.
Hey, Steve, they only closed 1.5 inches.
Yeah, 1.5 inches of rain, not gasoline.
No, but the 1.5 inches of the quote where it goes on the
Yeah.
inside of the islands. You know what I
Yes.
meant.
I see Chairman Dr. Pino has his hand up.
Oops, I'm unmuted. Yeah. Steve, will we be getting a report by any chance by the DEP as to the extent of the amount of gasoline that hit Nauk Harbor, plus not only Nauk Harbor but also the foam, the material that they used, what the extent of pollution is that we have to deal with?
I would
It's not only in
say
the water. It's not only in the water, but it's going to be certainly in the sediment that we oftentimes own. Let me put it that way. Every time we do dredging.
so. I would say that in likelihood the answer would be yes. I mean, the timing of which I don't know.
If I could speak, my understanding is that is the same thing that aquaculture would like to determine as well. So I don't know how it'll be in the form of a report, but they do want that information as well.
The good news is that not a lot of material made the harbor. Most of it stayed in the retention pond behind the mall.
Oh, okay.
So just the overflow of that retention pond made it. There was a report that there was smoke, however, coming from the outflow pipe. So the material was at least combusting or reacting in some way.
Now, the foam that they use, is it PFAS that's also in that part of that foam?
No, sir. So the chief of the fire department made that very clear this morning in the press conference that Norwalk uses green foam that is PFAS free.
Oh,
yeah, that was a huge relief for us.
Yeah,
the only bright spot of the day for
I guess they got it from King Industry came over because they have that system.
Yeah, they did. They were a
King
huge
Industries.
they should get a shout out as well in terms of
Yes,
Sure.
definitely.
nice to see how people come together in time of emergency. You're absolutely right, Steve. Good response.
Yeah. So thanks again, everyone. The committee reports. Back to you, Bill, for the Department of Health.
Okay, sure. So for the month of April, we had a total of 3.74 inches of rain. Last year, 5.51. Historically, 4.26. So we're a little bit under for the month, but overall doing okay. There was one bypass on April 28th. It was due to a failure of the Westport pump house. Their pumps failed and the backup tripped the electrical, so they weren't able to come on either. So there was a bypass there that lasted about 2 hours. They relegated under handled. I don't know if they've come to the cause of why the backup tripped. So they were looking at it. I can follow up on that for next month though.
Okay.
In addition, there was also 2 closures on April 2nd and again on April 12th, both due to rainfall. Other than that, there's no other reports.
Thank you, sir. And wastewater treatment proper, there is no one here. Mayor's Water Quality Committee is still listed on the website as city website is canceled. Does anyone have any news about its reinstatement and perhaps the appointment of a new chair? Yeah, it's okay. Hopefully this can be brought back online. It's an important committee. Anything on permits, Bill?
No.
Thank you. Police, Sergeant Basegli, please, sir.
You know, guys, so obviously the big news was the incident today. My understanding is that everything was caught in the catch basins and nothing actually made it out into the harbor. DEP had a boat contractor out there and they did boom everything off just in case something did make it past, but they were keeping an eye on it. And as of last I heard this afternoon, nothing made it into the harbor at all. So that's good news. Yeah, it's really all that we have going on right now.
Great news. Thanks again.
And then water
Advisory.
temp, we're at like 50 degrees right now, 51.
There's a
I'm
milestone.
sorry, what was the water temp?
50, 51.
I have a
Great.
question for Marine Police. How's the Shellfish boat or the Harbor Master boat?
I'm not really up to where that is right now. I know that it's been hauled. I don't really know what's going on with it. Bruce Lavala would have most of the information on that.
All right,
I can report
Thanks.
on that, Pete, when I have time.
okay.
Okay, then harbor management, please. Chairman Kibbe and Mr. Stedman.
Thank you, Chairman Bartish. I have two items. The most important is we've secured a public hearing for the underwatering of Eversource's 2 transmission cables under the Norwalk River. In our last meeting, we during the course of the meeting, Chris White, one of our commissioners, was able to do an electronic petition right while we were talking at the meeting, and it was issued, and within a day we had enough signatures gathered to secure a public hearing. So that was simpler than an old guy like me thinks it would be, but that was granted pretty quickly. I attended a meeting with Deep, so we've set some dates. I don't know if they're carved in stone yet, but the dates that were discussed for a site visit on May 22nd at 10:30 in the morning. May 29th, 6:30, public hearing. Public comment deadline June 5th, and the evidentiary hearing on June 6th with a June 10th continuance. And again, I've not confirmed those dates finally yet, but we should be proud that that's underway. In the meantime, we're trying to need to get together our point of view on all this, how we want to present this, because I think there's a couple of different points of view where we're coming from. Mine, in my experience with large electrical projects, is that once it's installed, it takes an act of God to have anything moved or adjusted or changed. So I think we have to be pretty aggressive about finding an alternative route for that cable. And I think it can be the answer to that is make it deeper and better protected than it is now. What they're proposing is a plastic conduit with a transmission cable and some other accessory cables dragged through that. If you look at the section drawing of it, there's no body or mass to the conduit that this all goes in. It's just cables in a plastic sleeve under the river. There are other ways of doing this. So the best alternative is to have it out of harm's way completely, so that the city is not obligated to involve Eversource or Eversource's successors to a very great extent to make any modifications. The other thought is to require a sum of money for that Eversource would have to pay to make modification that cities requires. These cables go under the launch ramps, and they go under a portion of the visitor docks that we have. So moving them again would be disruptive for a boating season to get them out of there and get them replaced in a different location. And the cost would be extensive. You're probably talking millions of dollars to just move those 2 cables once they're installed and operational. It's a very big deal to do that. They don't even go straight across the river. It's easy if you have a sign on each side of the river, so you can say, well, the cables go from here to there. But these are going to be kind of curve around all over the place. So they'll go down very close to the Straffolino Bridge. They find their way over under the northern dock that's parallel to the channel, and they curve across, and they end up at 90 Washington Street. So they kind of zigzag underneath the harbor. So I believe locating them is difficult. We haven't had a clear indication really what the signage on either side of the river is going to be for marking these things. In Bridgeport, they have a giant 4-foot by 8-foot billboard in orange that says, danger, will Will Smith, you're in big trouble here. So all that's got to be decided before I think this can move forward for the city. We can put an amount of money in there, like a punishment for having to move them, but they have to move them, and that's going to have to be at their expense in the future. But again, having been involved with this kind of project in my career, that you can be stalled 10 years before you get cables moved or an accommodation made. And that, to me, that's not satisfactory. I think the goal should be to get it right the first time. But we're just starting to discuss that now. So that's my 2 cents on that. The shellfish boat was supposed to be looked at today, but guess what? The mechanic didn't come to work because of the incident in I-95. We've had some conversation about the city might have some money that they could put in toward a new vessel. I think that's all kind of premature until we find out what's the matter with the vessel we have. I think the other thing we should be thinking about is what I know the Shellfish and the Harbor Master and Marine Police sort of all use that Harbor Master vessel. So we ought to do a quick evaluation of what hardware all three of us need out of that boat and look at that if we're going to buy something new. And we just have to see what happens when we get the present vessel evaluated. I think the Harbor Commission would like to have it back in service as soon as possible. And if that can be done for a reasonable repair fee. But that's ongoing conversation, and we'll keep everybody informed as it goes along. Again, we expected to have something today, knowing just what the ballpark of what the cost would be, but I don't have that today. So that's my speech. I'll yield back to you, Commissioner.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Good info. Go ahead, Pete.
The Shellfish Commission was the one that bought the boat for Shellfish Commission, and we lent it to Harbor Master and Marine Police whenever they needed it. So we were sharing costs with you guys to keep it running. So
until we know what it requires to keep it running, it's kind of premature that we get too far into it. If it's a few $100s or that $800 to get the engine going, that in the time frame we're in, my sense is we should just do that. But if there's anything different we need in a vessel between the Harbor Commission, the Shellfish Commission, and occasional use by the Marine Police, we should just talk about what kind of vessel makes the most sense.
Yeah, one that can pull giant barges that are in the wrong place for the next 6 years.
I was thinking more about inflatable dragons that you can pull around with people on them, but
Yeah.
Or remove docks during the winter.
Right.
Well,
Anything else to add, Chairman Dr. Pinto or Mr. Stedman to Harbor for tonight?
No, nothing.
I have a couple of thoughts, Steve, and I don't want to prolong the meeting and have it all about the Harbor Management Commission.
Please, Jeff, go ahead.
The public hearing was, in my opinion, an absolute necessity, but the results of it is uncertain because right now there are two legal parties to the hearing, which is Eversource that wants to get the permit from Deep, and Deep which wants to give the permit to Eversource. So that there's no legal intervention that's been taken place either by the city or by anyone representing the petitioners. So that's an issue there. Also, some thought on the status conference for what they're worth. The Eversource attorney was previously a Deep attorney and including and worked as a Deep hearing officer. So I guess he moved on to doing something else. And also there was a very interesting comment that was made that I related to a number of people since and can't get over. That there was a discussion of the date for the site visit, and the Deep attorney said that they hadn't been thinking about a site visit because the lines would be buried underground and underwater, and there would be nothing to see. Which I thought was an interesting take on the whole thing. So we'll see how this all goes. and we'll do, but I also don't feel, and I know Alan has a different perspective, but the route and the method for placing the lines underwater, that's been approved by the Connecticut Site Council. And I just don't see that there's maybe I'm wrong, that there's a mechanism to make them either change the method or the route. But we do know that there were alternatives to what's being proposed now, and they chose not to take any of those other alternatives, locations or method, and they chose to put it underneath the public facility. So given that, there's no logical reason why they shouldn't be responsible for any added costs that the city may incur because they're there, and that's the argument that I hope that we can make very, very good, well, in a good way. When we first brought this up to DEEP before the application was submitted some time ago, DEEP seemed to be sympathetic to that argument, because the visitors docks and the launching ramp, that's a duly permitted by DEEP public access facility, and it serves to advance the policies of the Connecticut Coastal Management Act for public access to Norwalk Harbor and Long Island Sound. So it seemed like DEEP would be sympathetic and require the sort of mitigation we were talking about. But more recently they haven't been. They said that's a city issue to address with Eversource. So we'll see how that all goes.
We need to have as many people, I think, as we could get there, Jeff, don't you?
Yeah. Oh yeah. But
Jeff,
again,
will they have,
it's
Jeff, will they have the city lawyers there too?
Well, that's one of the issues, because for the city to intervene, there's a legal means for doing that, and that means, but the city hasn't done that, and neither has a private group retained a lawyer to do that. But when there's a legal intervention, and then that, again, because right now the legal parties are Eversource that wants the permit and DEEP that wants to give it, and if you follow. It's the same hearing officer that was the hearing officer for the Walk Bridge public hearing. And if you recall, in that hearing, the hearing officer essentially dismissed the Harbor Commission's comments with reference to the Greenwich case that led to the Superior Court decision, and stated that the Harbor Commission has no special standing, is no different than the general public. So I think we just have to, we have all of these arguments to make. But we just have to try to protect the city's interest in that facility. And at the site visit, it's not you can't quite make questions and answers. It's just for the hearing officer to observe the conditions. And the public hearing is still it's all Zoom meeting. There's no physically getting together, except for the site visit. Anyway, I'll stop talking.
Yeah, but it's interesting, Jeff pointed out before, and that is all the parties concerned. The DEP has a safeguard mechanism that if anything happens, Eversource would have to pay for any damage that would be, for example, during the underwater drill, the horizontal drilling, that if there's a breach or anything, DEEP, Eversource is going to pay DEEP for any damages, and the Army Corps has their safeguard measure in place. That if they have to move those cables because of the commission, the Army Corps needed to do anything, that it's Eversource's responsibility. But the city sort of stood back and did nothing as protecting their own interest in this whole thing.
We also know based on.
Well, that's what we're trying to do.
Go ahead, Alan.
Yeah.
No, but the thing about the payment if they lose drilling fluid into the river, that's all standard contractor insurance for having an accident on a job site. We're not talking about that with the
no, but that's
future needs of for developing the harbor and for moving things around. If we want to expand the visitors dock, and we're told, oh gee, you can't do that, or we'll send somebody down in 6 months to meet with you, talk about that. I mean, it just is has the opportunity for infinite blocking and stopping and not doing it. So I think I think the prize is to get it out of harm's way so that we have some freedom to modify things there and going forward.
Mhm.
And I think it's important in a public hearing to have a public a site visit rather, to have as many people there from the community as you can get, because that's the only way you can show the amount of concern there is from the community.
I agree with you more on
Because
that.
they have a riot, but we have people, being interested in being polite and maybe asking questions and things like that.
Well, you're absolutely right about that, but this should have been done right from the get-go about 6 years ago when we first started, actually maybe 5 years ago when we first started the negotiation of underwater, the drilling of this facility. The city should have protected their interest with regard to either having it in another place, but for some reason, Eversource sold them a bill of goods to go right underneath.
There's a letter from the mayor, a signed letter from the mayor saying, kind of green lighting the whole thing back in 2018. So it's
Green lighting just to go under the harbor, and the Harbor Commission went along with it. No problem.
No,
going
no,
under the harbor.
no, John,
Under the visitors.
John, no, John and Alan, the letter from the mayor, that was a letter to the Corps of Engineers, expressing support for the application to move forward to the Corps of Engineers.
That's
That
right.
was a requirement of that Corps permit.
That's right.
Yes, it wasn't to say that, we approve this or we agree with it. It was just to move to give Eversource the opportunity to move the application forward.
Right.
And
That's right.
the other thing, you've followed what's been going on in Fairfield, I'm assuming, with the siting council, and the town of Fairfield was unanimous in opposition to. I mean, it wasn't not Eversource there; it was United Illuminating.
Right.
But united in standing up to the siting council. In what now the siting council's decision is being challenged in Superior Court, and there are pending bills in the legislature this session, which is about to end, that would change the way the siting council does business, and in part because of the concern about the way they make decisions and what happened in Fairfield, and not again, I said I was going to stop, but some of us there's a real conflict of interest because it's the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection now, and DEEP has a vote on the siting council. But DEEP also has to review the environmental impacts of something that the siting council they're not. It's just something's just not right in my opinion. But that's just my opinion, and our job is to make our comments thoughtfully and protect the city's interest. And the decision is not ours, but we have a job to do. That's.
Mm-hmm.
I have some other guys. Steve, there are several other topics. We're pursuing, the Harbor Commission is a grant application to the Connecticut Port Authority for funds to redo the city's marina on the east side of Veterans Park. And so the estimate of probable cost now is about $4 million. The Port Authority is not going to provide that entire amount, but they will determine how much they can provide. And we were to have a meeting with the Port Authority officials this afternoon at Veterans Park to show them the marina, but that didn't work out because of the traffic issues. It was a meeting in Stamford this morning, and they were late, and then they couldn't get back. So we're trying to reschedule that. But that grant application is due on July 1st, and so we feel we have a very good chance of getting partial funding for that. Also, the Norwalk River Watershed Initiative, which some of you are familiar with, that's a 7-town collaborative effort that started many years ago, in large part because of the concern of pollution in the watershed affecting shellfish resources in Norwalk Harbor. So DEEP felt that this was the Norwalk River watershed was like the first most important watershed to do a watershed-based plan for, and the Harbor Commission was involved in that. Now, the Connecticut Sea Grant has received some money and is I don't know where they got it from, a federal grant, I guess. And they're going to retain a consultant who would update that watershed-based plan. So I think we should all be involved in that. And if you remember the work that Professor Hart did for us several years ago, where we analyzed the bacteria data in the river, related it to the bacteria counts in the harbor, and could demonstrate the relationship between increased bacteria in the lower part of the watershed and then the subsequent rise in bacteria in the harbor. So that's something we should be aware of and participate in. Also, the USGS has finished its nutrient monitoring work with instruments that they had at the Maritime Aquarium and the Cove Marina, and they were doing this for deep, and they're now they're transferring all of the data to deep, and deep is going to do some sort of model about nutrient pollution. But we thought it would be a good idea if there was some sort of a summary report that was done that would have benefit to the public, so the public could know what the work was for and what the results are. So the USGS is trying to get funds from DEEP to allow a summary report, not just transferring all the data, but so anyway, we're going to call the DEEP person and who's involved with this and see if there's a way that, you know, at least to support them giving them some money to do a report, a final report. There's also this Veterans Park resiliency study that's being done. John and I talked with a consultant. I guess this is a grant to the Maritime Aquarium, and we had a very good talk with the person who was quite knowledgeable. But the interesting thing is, and he agreed, there's no immediate problem at Veterans Park. The shoreline isn't eroding, and if it floods, so what? It's an open space recreation area, and that's the sort of thing that the sort of uses that you want in the floodplain. So what their project is to look to see how they can improve coastal resources, either by planting wetlands or doing something else around the shoreline that would just improve coastal resources. But it's not like a problem or an issue with, you know, eroding shoreline or hazardous waste that's being exposed. It's an environmental enhancement project, and so we'll look forward to seeing how that works out. And then you know, related to the use of the harbor, you know, the interesting discussion now about the reopening of the O&G facility on the upper harbor to bring in barge deliveries of aggregate, sand and gravel, and the opposition that's meeting from nearby residents and some others. We heard a lot of comments from people at the last Harbor Commission meeting, and I guess we'll have to consider those comments. But as we pointed out, the Federal Navigation Channel is authorized and dredged 10 feet deep for the purpose of supporting waterborne commerce, such as O&G is proposing. And if we can work out the potential conflicts between encroachments into the channel and make sure that there's continued access from the Norwalk Boat Club, you know, this is a use that's envisioned in the harbor management plan. But anyway, thanks for letting me talk, Steve. I'm sorry to go on for so long. So that's my contribution here.
Well, thanks very much, Jeff, for outlining all of those. Appreciate it. That ends the committee reports. Motion to accept them as presented.
Motion to accept.
Thank you, Nick. A second.
Second, Pete.
Thank you, Pete. And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Yes. So under old business, we did have Eversource listed, but I guess if there are any comments by the commissioners to these commissioners to Harbor questions. Otherwise, I think we can move on with that. I don't think there are any action items per se tonight for us. Hearing none. 2 Nathan Hale Drive is on our old business, and there was correspondence on that today, and I frankly just haven't been able to read it. So I'd like to put that back on the agenda so that we can handle it more substantively next month. And that's the end, unless anyone has anything else. Sirs?
Hey, Steve, do you mind forwarding that correspondence?
Yes.
For some reason, I don't get that. Yeah.
Sure thing. That's it.
Could we, excuse me, Steve, could we get notification when they are having these meetings for the
What do you mean? From the
cable,
city?
for the cable? They're picking dates so they're gonna meet.
Yeah, I think it would just be up to people who are in touch to email the rest of us. I don't think the city's going to go out of their way to tell us.
Oh, that's what I'm saying. If harbor management knows when the meetings are gonna be, for them to send us a quick email.
Sure.
Shirley
Hey,
Pete
do you
can take
mind if
care
I
of that.
ask this question? Sorry, did I interrupt somebody?
Go ahead, John. Go ahead.
Who is protecting the city's interest who is protecting the city's interest when it comes to this piece of the puzzle when you're talking about cabling underneath the Norwalk River that may or may not impact future development of where does that responsibility lie in making sure that the city gets a good deal?
Right now, I was hoping it would be the Harbor Management Commission dealing with drilling underneath the harbor.
Which the Norwalk Hour presents today as micro tunneling, which it is not. A much better procedure. This is HDD.
Right. This negotiation went on several years back, and the Harbor Commission was not originally involved in the, inception of of this whole project. They went directly to DPW.
Yeah, and there was a consultant at the time, John, who.
Well, not with the city, but we not contract, but we got hold of a consultant to discuss the concept of horizontal, drilling. And
I'm not speaking to Mr. Melman. I'm speaking to Ms. Prosy.
Oh yes, well, that's certainly time passed. Yes.
Yeah.
But so I guess I'm new to this, so apologies. But at some point in the future, there is the potential of significant additional costs being borne by somebody. I don't know what entity that might be, whether it's a private entity, i.e. Eversource, or I don't even know if they're a private entity anymore, but or the city, if it comes to expansion or no availability to expansion of public access to the waterway through those docks. At what point is it going to be determined who is going to bear the responsibility for paying for or potentially paying for that piece of the puzzle?
Well, that was the whole point that Mr. Kibbe made. That if we wanted to come up with a new design in the future, it would be the city's responsibility to come up with a new design, because it's basically our facility. Now, if we contract someone and you say all of a sudden we want to do this aspect, I don't know what it's going to be, but if we had a new design, that we get an architect involved, we're going to come up with a design, but then we're going to call in a company and say, we have 215 kilovolt high tension wires located underneath this facility. Oh God, we now need special equipment. We need to take special attention. We just can't have a regular construction company come in because now you've got this impedance there. Who's going to pay for the overcost of that? And that's the whole concept here, and that we should have Eversource pay for the additional cost over and above the normal cost of what it would normally be if there wasn't that underwater cabling there. That's basically what we're trying to argue.
No, yes, I get that point. Thank you. And I appreciate that attention being brought to this. But under the current situation, what would the various parties argue and who would be successful?
Good question.
Well, if I might interject here just a bit, But as things stand now, the responsibility for any added cost would rest with the city, because Eversource hasn't offered or indicated that they would cover any of the additional added costs. And the very clear statement was made by Eversource that you will not be precluded from work on the visitor's dock, but you will be subject to restrictions and subject to our approval. And that was a very clear statement. So based on clearly, sort of objectively looking at this, it's logical to assume that there would be added costs associated with repair or maintenance or replacement. And so our argument is
I get that
the added costs should be borne by Eversource. But I don't. But
I get that. So
just,
what when this was being yeah, I get that. So thank you. So what did the city get in exchange for allowing that language to stand, or allowing that future responsibility to be borne by the city itself?
Well,
Like
again,
if there was an exchange, if there was an exchange of value, then it would be interesting to understand what that is, and maybe that's fair. But the city definitely needs to be aware, the city definitely needs to be aware that they have given something of potentially tremendous value or future tremendous cost in exchange for allowing what they're allowing.
Yeah, they have. There's an agreement today. It's I believe it's $440,000 now that the city gets really toward Elizabeth Street after the cable goes underground. It's close to $500,000 of compensation that Eversource is going to give the city for ostensibly fixing up Elizabeth Street after this thing goes underground. And there's $50,000 to the Harbor Commission for whatever we want to do. We can go on a trip to Europe or something. I don't know. But in my opinion, there's not enough money there to really pay for doing anything significant in terms of maintaining or moving these cables or doing any development at all in that area. Jeff, you have your box on.
No, I was just going to say that the questions that were just asked are questions that will be addressed during the public hearing, I'm sure. And there was also the purchase or payment of an easement through the park, but not an easement of the work through the visitors dock and the launching ramp, but elsewhere in the park for use of the park. I believe that Eversource needed to buy an easement from the city. But again, that all our understanding is covers areas outside of the visitors dock, and the payment of the offer to pay the Shellfish Commission was going to get $10,000, I think, payment from Eversource, and I forget what the amount was to the Harbor Commission.
That was $50,000.
$50,000.
That appearance doesn't look too. The opinion of some people, that doesn't really look too good. That
I 100% agree with. Yeah, I 100% agree with your objection. 5 or 6 meetings back about the appearance of that. Whatever, I totally agree. If that money went to the city to remediate some of the expenditures of actual work, that was a different story. But going to the commissions, that was a bit tough.
I'd call it a bribe.
Couldn't agree with you more. Yeah.
I wouldn't call it a bribe in a public meeting, but yes, I understand your point.
I'll put it in public meeting. I know. I worked for them for 20 years, and whatever they want to do, they just do it. That's the problem with them.
And the only thing I would say is that we're not trying to be negative or obstructionist. We're just trying to uphold the public interest and make decisions and comments pursuant to the authorities that the Harbor Commission and the Shellfish Commission have. Understanding that the final decision will be made out, not by us, but by an adjudicator. And so we're just the other thing that was interesting is when we learned from the person who was helping us that essentially unheard of to route electric lines like this under a public facility such as this. And when we brought that up to Eversource, the Eversource person said very clearly that they haven't seen this either. So putting it under a public facility, and if they're correct that the city won't be, adversely affected, or it won't be well, all right, then that's fine. But if it is, you think it's fair that you would have to pay the added cost for your. But anyway, thank you for letting me talk. We'll do the best we can in the public hearing, during the public hearing.
Well, one thing we got to bring up.
Thank you for those questions.
One of the things we got to bring up in this public hearing is maintenance of the docks, just plain maintenance. Eversource wants us to call them and say we're doing maintenance, and they'll tell us what we can do. That's basically saying it's their dock.
Well, they have the right of way underneath there.
You know what I'm saying? But
Sizable chunk right away underneath those visitors docks.
yeah.
100 kVA kind of buys you that, I guess. It prevents you from just drilling away underneath there.
That's why most of the contractors won't even want to touch it.
Well, that's the point. That's going to drive up the cost of doing business in any way, shape, or form. Now you look at this. It's just so intuitively obvious that I'm just surprised that the city didn't see this right from the beginning.
It was downplayed for sure.
Well, Eversource could have sold them a bridge as well, a piece of the Brooklyn Bridge, I think, at that time, because they all went for it.
Well, the other thing that was quite interesting, and we talked about this at the Harbor Commission meeting, but when the DOT prepared its environmental impact evaluation for the bridge, there was a lawsuit brought against that environmental impact evaluation by a private group in federal court. And because the environmental impact evaluation did not look at the impacts of the Eversource project. And so the lawsuit alleged that, the Eversource project is part of the railroad bridge project, and by not addressing the impacts of it, you're improperly segmenting the project to avoid having to address those impacts. And that lawsuit was dismissed, not on its merits, as I understand, but on the determination that the plaintiffs didn't have standing to bring the case. But clearly, this is part of the railroad bridge project, and that's a moot point now. But having the fullest environmental review, and also having a public hearing where everybody involved can hear this stuff is just part of, in my opinion, good public process, and the commissions can raise these. Well, anyway, I went back on my statement that I wasn't going to talk anymore. Thank you.
No, but I think in the original agreement, when the bridge project went together, they separated the two projects. I think it was Eversource. We talked to Marcia Wallman, made the statement that the two processes were separate. The bridge project.
Yes, but that's clearly not correct, because
we know that. But apparently somebody else didn't know, or other people didn't know that.
Yeah, we were sold that the relocation had to happen right away.
Yes.
Which is also patently false, because
it's 6 years later.
Well, and there are cranes set up down there, and there's stuff going on. Evidently, they didn't need it. It was a high pressure sales tactic.
Hurry up and wait.
I'll also make the statement that years ago the idea for the visitors dock came from the Harbor Management Commission, and then it was determined that Parks and Rec would manage it, but the idea came from the commission. And there's also the commission prepared the grant applications for receiving almost $1 million to redo the visitors dock, and that was state bonded money. That was several years ago. And then prior to that, when the harbor was dredged, we also applied for a grant that allowed the dredging contractor was it the same contractor, John? But we also got a grant for dredging the area of the visitors docks at that time.
That's right.
The Harbor Commission has
testing. We paid for everything. Well,
yes, significant interest in the right to make these comments, and then we'll see how it works out.
Anything else from anyone?
And of course,
go ahead, Jeff.
I won't say it, but Pete had the best statement to sum up this, but I won't, don't say it now. People, that was some years ago, and we can talk about that.
But it still applies.
Right.
Okay. All righty, a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion.
Thank you, Pete, on a second.
Second, John Paisler.
Thank you, John. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
None opposed? The ayes have it. We'll see everybody in June, if not before then.
Good night, everyone.
At the public,
Right, thank
at the
you.
site visit.
Excuse me,
Yeah,
Aye.
thank you.
as long as I
Bye.
can beat
Thank you.
Alan, could you hold on for a minute? Yeah, I was just wondering, could I just make a quick statement to Mr. Kibbe? Chairman
Yeah,
Vardy?
meeting's
I'm all
over.
ears.
Meeting's over, but go ahead.
Yeah, the meeting's over, but very quickly, and I won't hold you, the letter that you got from Brian Baker regarding that.
Yes.
Yeah, we've addressed issues very similar to this, Alan, before. So something like this, we can make a statement with regard to the height of the building, with regard to having any building near a village district that's close to the harbor, to make sure that they maintain certain vistas or views there. But we can discuss it, or we can say that we have no comment, basically.
Right.
Yeah. But we have dealt with applications like this before, yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
I'll get back to you on that. But I'm sorry, Chairman Barter.
Have a good night, guys.
Thank you very much for.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you for participating.